Good. We'll call to order the concurrent meeting from the House. If you'll call the order, please. Call the roll, please.
Representative Banta. Representative Bojanowski.
Here.
Representative Bridges. Here. Representative Brown. Representative Dietz.
Here.
Representative Fleming.
Present.
Representative Freeland.
Present.
Representative Fugit.
Here.
Representative Gentry. Representative Hart. Representative Lockett. Representative McPherson.
Here.
Representative Riley. Representative Stevenson.
Here.
Representative Thomas.
Present.
Representative Truitt. Representative Upchurch.
Here.
Representative Williams.
Here.
Vice Chair Bowling.
Here.
Vice Chair Bray. Chair Petrie.
Here. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, very well. So first up this morning for our concurrent meeting, we have a presentation from Emergency Management on the status of the events in Eastern Kentucky. So with that, gentlemen from the Executive Branch, if you'd please come up, identify yourself for the record, and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Hicks, Secretary of the Governor's Executive Cabinet and State Budget Director.
Eric Gibson, Director of Kentucky Emergency Management.
And Jim Gray, Kentucky Transportation Cabinet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman, for having us. It was a good opportunity to give an overview of the recent storms and flooding disaster in the Commonwealth. And so we wanted to come today and kind of give you a flavor of what had happened, what we've done about it, what we're going to do about it, and some items for your consideration. So I'll turn it over to Director Gibson.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for at least inviting me down just to hear a little bit about the response, as it's still an ongoing event, and we're still very actively involved in the disaster, more so now towards the recovery phase, the debris management phase, and to try to get some of this underhand and get our centers open for registrations and things. The event, of course, as you all know, I've got a couple of slides, just kind of talks a little bit about some of the stuff that was going on and kind of set the stage for the impact. At this time, when the storm started on February the 14th, it began in our western counties, and the next slide that I'll bring up kind of highlights that. We saw this disaster start spreading in from the west, and then as it moved east, it created different types of flooding. Our riverine type flooding in our western counties, along with some flash flooding early on, and then as the event prolonged into the eastern Kentucky area, we saw that the high water along the Tug Fork, Lavasa Fork, and affected many of the counties in the east and the northeast, coming up through Martin and Pike counties, and then down to the south as well. The Perry and the Letcher, Clay have all been majorly impacted. Power outages in this event went up to the highest number, 41,578 at the height of the event. 18,000 meters without water. Of course, you usually figure there's three people or so in each house, so that's a significant impact for critical infrastructure. Our numbers for shelter have been up and down over the event. Initially we had almost 600 people in shelter. We continue to shelter quite a few people still today in state parks, and then we're starting to move people into some of the travel trailers at Jenny Wiley now as this continues to go on. The immediate response was very swift. We pre-staged teams as we saw this event coming. The National Weather Service talked about this event for several days. We knew it was going to be a significant rain event. We moved 33 of the state teams into position. We actually had a few more teams with high-wheel vehicles staged across the Commonwealth. From east to west, we had teams pre-deployed, ready to respond to wherever the disaster started to be an issue. Of that, we used 33 of our state teams, and as this event unfolded, we saw that our urban search and rescue teams, or our search and rescue teams in general, that are from your local departments, the response was going to be more than they could staff. So we started requesting that federal assistance. During the night from the 15th into the 16th, we requested an emergency declaration. That immediately turns on direct federal assistance, and we were able to bring in teams from Ohio, Indiana, and Missouri from the FEMA teams come in. That's Swiftwater Assets, and that brought in that additional 170 staff. Indiana conservation officers sent in a number of officers, and 2 teams out of North Carolina were willing to come up and provide some assistance, and we were able to put them in through the Cumberland Gap to get into that hardest impacted area down there as the water was coming up and blocking many of our roads. So we had a lot of out-of-state assistance. The next slide that I show just kind of, this is how our counties started to declare states of emergency, and that's actually, since we've updated this map, it's actually 73. Morgan County has submitted written declaration for a state of emergency in their county. So as many of the members of this body sit before you, I'd just like to show you the map and show that it's, it's not one specific area of our state that was impacted by this event. We've seen a significant impact through all parts of the state. It's kind of excluding that very northern area. And as this is just kind of where our states made those declarations, and counties made those declarations to the state. And then the next map kind of indicates where the federal assistance is starting to be applied. For this event, we've got 23 total fatalities at this point. Actually had another fatality come in today. It didn't pass away today, but the public health confirmed that death today. So this event involves a lot more counties than some of the other events that you all are familiar with, being the Western Kentucky tornadoes, the Eastern Kentucky flooding of the past. At this time, we're opening up a number of disaster recovery centers. We have teams going door to door through those impacted counties that are listed there. And you can see the kind of the force lay down. Those dots all kind of indicate different things that are going on to get the assistance into the individuals that live in those counties. I think we've had a tremendous impact. Less than 7 days ago, we signed President Trump signed this declaration for us to start activating the individual assistance. And this morning's update at 11 o'clock, we had dispersed $5.5 million to individuals in Eastern Kentucky. So I think over the quick response that we established from the time the declaration was signed until we actually were able to get people registered for assistance was just a little over 2.5 hours. We had disaster survivor teams going into the shelters, getting people's information. So we've worked very, very quickly to be on the front side, leaning forward and prepared. When the declaration became something that we could use, we started using that to do state-led registration centers, where we've had a very good success in reaching many of our Kentucky citizens that were in need of help. As we've operated this disaster, today we were made aware that Estill, Simpson, and Johnson County have now been added for individual assistance and public assistance. So we're opening up more centers, and we continue to do our damage assessments. This is very much an ongoing disaster, and you'll see that it takes time to get out to every one of the communities and measure every one of the homes and businesses and bridges and roads that have been damaged. This is just a snapshot of the dashboard that we use at our office. I think it is a pretty good indicator of how much work there is going into this. It looks like we've done, at this time when we snapshotted this morning, the public assistance estimates are about $58 million. We expect that to continue to grow for quite some time, very, very early on PA damage assessments. You also see on the left side there the individual assistance surveys that have been completed by my team and teams from FEMA. About 2,005 homes have been inspected and 272 businesses have been inspected. Just kind of a little snapshot into where that's going on at, and you can see it's heavily focused around all of the river basins that created a lot of the issues. Like I said, this is just a snapshot. We believe this is early on in this disaster, and it continues to grow. I think we have a few issues that are important to note, and that's the debris and the number of damages that we've seen to public infrastructure with county roads and bridges being severely impacted. The debris mission is probably on many of your all's judges and mayors' radar for sure. They are all seeing this debris as it's starting to come from the homes that people are mucking out their damaged property, and it's starting to pile up along the streets. And I've visited Eastern Kentucky twice since this event, and it's growing every single time we go over there. Debris is that category A on that right-hand side of the page, and that estimate, we have a team of Corps of Engineers and staff from Kentucky Emergency Management out doing debris estimates every day, and we're trying to understand just how much debris there is and how big of a mission it's going to be to actually get it all cleaned up and into the proper landfill, be it hazardous waste or vegetative debris or whatever it may be. I met with the Corps of Engineers just a little bit ago to check on that because I knew it would be an issue that would be of concern for this body. And it looks like the estimates are ongoing. We've requested Category A, a federal declaration on Category A, which we currently don't have in place right now. But that will come after we will make that request. We have made the request for 4 counties, but we'll continue to make those requests as the damage assessments or debris assessments come in to kind of indicate that we have a level of debris that requires federal assistance to get the cleanup of that done. A few other things to be brief that we've done is just taken out a lot of our, we took out a lot of supplies, commodities, water, food, blankets, things like that to help those citizens during that time that they were in those shelters. I think it's a pretty good, I think we moved 63 truckloads of water to those counties that have been impacted because we saw that water was a part of our critical infrastructure that was really severely impacted through the purification products and all to making sure that the systems were up and running. So we've seen that as one of our biggest requests, along with meals and blankets and shelter, things of that nature. So with that, probably have a few other slides that just kind of compare this disaster, one of the things that we're talked about often, and try to move along quickly. Just to kind of put it in relation to the other disaster, more deaths in the tornado event. That particular disaster was one of that hit about $350 million disaster. And then we kind of talk about the Eastern Kentucky floods. 2 of our landmark events, I think, that kind of set the stage for what disaster recovery can look like. Eastern Kentucky flooding in the first event was that happened back in 22. I'm sorry, that date's wrong on there. I apologize. $630 million public assistance project. So we do expect that $58 million that was on the bottom of that page to continue to grow as we continue to recover and get those assessments in.
Thank you, Eric. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn it over to Secretary Gray to talk a little bit about roads and bridges.
Okay. Thank you, Secretary, and Chairman, and all and the other members of the committee. Thank you for your public service. Start out that way. Let me give a snapshot of context and the role that KYTC has performed so far since the flooding. First off, I want to acknowledge the partners that were so engaged in this project so far. KYEM and its leadership, FHWA, Federal Highways, and FEMA, Kentucky State Police, our counties and cities that we've been working with. The emergency response that KYTC first initiated right after, during and after the floods included deploying barricades, cones for closed or damaged roads. We had a peak of, across the state, of 355 road closures. Today, that's down to 49. What else did we do? We advised the public, of course, of these closures through goky.ky.gov and Waze. We cleared storm-related minor debris. We addressed then the snow and the ice and more snow amid the flood response. And then we continued, of course, and have continued the flood response, reopening roads as flooding has receded. Another area that the Cabinet engages in, responsibility and activity, is transporting and coordinating with KYEM. We transport many items, including water, food, blankets, heaters, cleaning supplies, that represented 68 loads with 18 drivers, representing about 5 trips per day. We've been responsible for evaluating and repairing state routes, slides and rock falls, pavement breaks, bridges and culvert damage, and debris along state roads, roadside and against bridges. We also provided resources to our local governments regarding the damages. What does that look like? That's inspecting bridges and providing damage assessments. This flood impacted 39 counties for KYTC infrastructure and county infrastructure. That I mentioned already that we had a peak closure of 355. That's down to 49 today. 14 of those closures are due to slides and rockfalls. 35 due to flooding. This is of the 49 still closed. Now, water is receding still along the Green and Ohio rivers, and as reservoirs release excess water. In terms of bridge damage, 18 bridges with damages. That includes 3 state bridges, and the remainder are county bridges. 94 bridges with debris, a load of debris, and 579 roadway damages. Now, we all know that we're not in the business of comparing disasters. It's worth noting that in 2022, we inspected more than 1,000 bridges. 155 were damaged, and that represented a value and a cost of about $55 million. Over 1,000 roadway damages occurred across 9 counties. This time, of course, we've had impacts in 39 counties. We've had 579 roadway damages, and as I said earlier, 18 bridges were impacted and damaged in the 25 in this event. So, John, or Secretary Hicks,
Yeah.
back to you.
Thank you. I might want to toss it back to Director Gibson for a moment.
As I was covering all the responses that went on across the state, obviously many of these things were led by your local emergency managers, your local officials, supported by all of the state agencies that we call into the EOC. But I didn't say anything about the National Guard, and that would be a mistake as well. Over 250 guardsmen were activated for this event to assist you in your all's counties as we dispersed these goods, as we cleared roadways, did some very dangerous work using high-wheel vehicles to go into some pretty deep water to try to rescue those citizens. And during this event, we used a lot of your local search and rescue teams, and I mentioned that in the beginning, but I don't know that I give enough credit to the work that they've done. And I ask for Secretary Hicks to give me just one opportunity to say thank you to you all, but to also to all those first responders that you all support often, because the work that they did was very heroic. We pulled the number of citizens out of harm's way. Over 1,500 citizens were rescued in water rescues throughout the state, and that was done by your search and rescue teams, your urban search and rescue team that this body supported. That's a function of KYEM, along with your National Guardsmen using high-wheel vehicles and aircraft and everything necessary to save people's lives. So many thanks goes out to those first responders, but and the support that you all have provided for them to be able to do those jobs well. To be able to stand up more than 30 teams before a rain event occurs says a lot about our community's willingness to prepare and be ready for that call. And in the hurry of trying to make sure I was in time for everything that I was able to say today, I didn't want to rush away from an opportunity to say thank you to you all for their support and for them for all that they did to save the Kentuckians that they were able to pull from the water. So thank you all, and thanks to them as well.
Mr. Chairman, in response to the response and the recovery, one of the things the administration was proposing and discussing is for your all's consideration. There are a couple of buckets in finance. The first of which is all of the activities that Director Gibson was just describing are directed out of the Emergency Operations Center from our Division of Emergency Management. That's the way, once the governor declares a disaster, that's how it activates. In the budget, you all provide a provision for necessary government and expenses. That's just a term we've used for years to say unappropriated general fund dollars that are needed in certain circumstances. And this is a long-standing one. You all have included in this current biennial budget a cap of $50 million for the portion of the responses that Director Gibson was speaking about. So $50 million. We've allocated just prior to and during the beginning of this disaster, 21.5 million of that 50 million, leaving a little 28.5 million of the cap available. We're still, as the director and the secretary was saying, we're still assessing the damage, but we feel pretty certain, just because of the debris removal exercise itself, that we're going to hit that 50 million cap. And so one of the things we asked the General Assembly to consider is to, in essence, provide for more funding than the 50 million so that we can continuously respond to this disaster as we move down the line. And as the director said, the debris removal is going to be the biggest number. And it was when we did the East Kentucky flood. For example, in the East Kentucky flood disaster in 22, we spent $338 million of state general fund dollars on that one. Now, that was a much larger and more damaging disaster, but to give you a sense of, and that was a record. We'd never spent anything near that in any prior, in the ice storms or in the other floods or in the tornadoes. That was a big one. So, but just to give you a sense of sometimes the need is great, and in this case, one thing we do know. Now, we recognize that come July 1, another 50 million kicks in terms of the budget bill, but we feel pretty good that before we get there, we're going to hit that cap, and so we ask your indulgence in terms of lifting the cap or appropriating more funds. The second approach would be, what you all have done and working with the administration as well, has created what we've termed safe funds. We did that in West Kentucky with the tornadoes and storms, and we did it in East Kentucky in 22 for the flooding then. And so we're proposing a third safe fund, if you will, that covers the entirety of the map that Director Gibson showed you there. And what we've learned in putting that together, one, we now have it in statute. Chapter 39A, I think it's 303 and 305, respectively, are the safe funds. We've set up a structure by which the eligible recipients are cities, counties, school districts, state agencies, nonprofit or public utilities. Those are kind of the 5 users of the funds. And you all appropriated, it was like $200 million roughly in the West Kentucky and $200 million in East Kentucky, divided up in different ways. But those were the beneficiaries of that. And we've used those funds and used them well. Let me give you some examples in this disaster. What might be needed by these entities in recovering and responding to the disaster? Well, the first of which is around debris removal. We're going to have a state-funded portion of that, and there's going to be some locally funded portions of that. But county roads and county bridge damages and repairs and replacements is another area where it's the local government's infrastructure that is affected. Same thing with water and sewer utilities. As the director showed you some of the outages that happened, and some of those outages happened because there was it wasn't just flooding, right? It was damage that occurred with water lines as well as pump stations and other things. And then the emergency response themselves, the director talked about county emergency managers and the first responders. Those are expenses and outlays that those local governments have incurred and will continue to incur as they react to the flooding disaster. In the uses of the safe funds before, for expenses, and we try to maximize the amount of these expenses that are FEMA reimbursement eligible, right? And so the emergency managers and the county emergency management, they go to really good lengths at documenting things well so that we assure ourselves of the capacity to apply for and receive FEMA reimbursement. FEMA will give you 75%, and the rest of us we come up with 25%. We've split that among 13% local governments, 12% state governments. That's been our policy for years. And so that 13% local government share is another financial outlay that the counties and cities have to, and these nonprofits and public utilities have to put out. One of the things we did in both of those safe funds is we allowed those safe funds to cover that 13% that is the responsibility of the local governments. Another thing we've done and with your all's help is provided for, as these local governments have to spend money to do these things, as I've just described on the front end, that's a unbudgeted expense to them, right? And so it strains their fiscal situation. And so the safe funds have been used to provide strained fiscal liquidity, meaning they show the Department of Local Government is kind of our judge and jury on that, and they show the Department of Education in the case of school districts, here's what I've had to do and spend, and here's how much it affected my budget. And so we measure that and say, yes, it has imposed a strain on your fiscal house. And so the SAFE Fund has been a use of a financing source to fill that gap back in for those local governments. And the structure in the statutes also provide that those local entities, if and when they receive, whether it's insurance proceeds or FEMA reimbursement, that those funds can accrue back into the SAFE Fund. So the idea here was, that we'll give you some temporary, assistance on with your budget while you're spending the money you need to respond to the disaster. So we've identified in a couple of cases from the past SAFE funds some resources that could be brought to bear to this disaster. The first of which is in the West Kentucky SAFE Fund. There was a $25 million allocation for the Western Kentucky Risk Assistance Fund. It was kind of a small business loan fund. It turns that would be administered by our Cabinet for Economic Development. Well, it turns out that Cabinet has, through another federal program, a more beneficial set of terms, and so that $25 million really hasn't been used at all. And so, but it's not taking anything away, because there is another program funded from the ARPA funds to the Cabinet for Economic Development that is being used. So that we would propose that $25 million kind of be brought to bear into this new SAFE Fund with no harm to anybody, just using that $25 million in this way. Another amount of money was in the East Kentucky SAFE Fund. We set aside some funds to the Transportation Cabinet for repair of state roads and state bridges from the Eastern Kentucky flooding disaster. Well, they've done. They know most of the work that needs to be done, and they've done plenty of it. And they've got about $20 million that is unneeded, and we'd like to put that $20 million toward the state road and state bridge repair that is resulting from this disaster. So just directing it from the prior disaster to this one. So there's $45 million that is out there. You all appropriated it for the purposes of responding to natural disasters. Those have been used properly, and we have some funds left over that we think would be good use here in terms of this current disaster. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll close it up and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your work. This is an interesting whole of government exercise, regardless of the level that occurs and the activities that have to take place, both short-term and long-term. It kind of touches everyone in some degree. So speaking of that, just briefly here, obviously with those near-term and long-term needs, we've had conversations previously about the debris removal. That's kind of the most direct impact. Have we had any progress on figuring out where we're going to take the debris yet?
Yes, sir. I think we've made some progress on that. The Pike County Fiscal Court has a landfill in Pike County that is very near its completion, or a full. The county judge executive and I have spoke at length about the opportunity or the need for an expansion to allow him to be able to bring some of the material from this event into that landfill. He has a permit for a Tier 6 expansion, I think is what he called it, and he's willing to start receiving debris as he works towards opening up that expansion in that landfill. So we believe that we're going to be able to bring down some of those costs by being able to get that into that Pike County landfill, at least that Pike County debris for sure that's being generated in that county. So we were really struggling with where we're going to put this debris at, and to that we've had many discussions since we spoke, sir.
Good. I'm glad that everything's working well in that regard there. Other questions from the committee? Representative Fugit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really not a question. I just want to say thanks to Director Gibson and Secretaries, all of your all's response to East Kentucky. Although it was a different type of flood this time, it's still devastating to our people that within a mile of my house. It just damaged, the water treatment plants, slides in the roads where slides have never been, mountain slides, and businesses, homes affected. The debris is really one of the worst things when you go to people's houses this weekend and literally everything they own is out in the driveway where they've cleaned their houses out. And the area that I'm talking about was not affected by the flood at all in 22. As bad as it was in 22, this area was not affected at all. And so the debris is going to be a big thing for us to be able to get rid of. But you know, I just want to say thanks especially to Director Gibson and our EM directors back home for working with you all and working together. We had needs that were met immediately. There was, I don't know how many tractor trailer loads of water that we gave out in our counties. There was part of our county that was out without water for 20 to 25 days, and just now getting some of it back on. Buckhorn Lodge was available and is housing several families from our area right now. Again, I just want to say thanks for all that you've done, and I want to say thanks to Chairman Petrie, Chairman McDaniel for having this meeting so we could sit down and talk about the importance of responding to our people back home in the mountains. And you know, again, I just thank you. And our people's hurting, but again, we'll fight back, claw back, and work. They're all working to, you know, to make things better back home. So thank you all very much.
Very good. Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to, I guess, first of all, express my appreciation for your hard work and time that y'all have gone through. Sorry, I'm behind the whole Director. Let me scoot over. Nothing.
Come on.
Okay, thank you. I do appreciate the heavy lift that y'all put forth, but also the even probably a bigger heavy lift with the first responders and so forth. And this is sort of a naive question, and I reflect on the transportation programs and then also sanitation. Obviously, the big ticket item is debris. Is there any reference or any models out there in the country, or have y'all entertained any ideas or thoughts on going through, and I'm sure there'll be an extra expense of that, but think about the landfill. Is there any process of looking at and going through that debris and separating them out for recycling or repurposing that particular materials?
Absolutely. It's a great question, and it's something that the master agreement in place actually encourages. That debris management site is what we call it, a DMS or debris management site. We bring the debris and then sort it into those categories of vegetative, white goods, which would be recyclable items, and then the trash, and then hazardous is the fourth category that goes to a certain landfill that can handle that type of material. So that reduction, if you will, of that vegetative debris to not go into our landfills is one of the things that we're really focused on, trying to limit that cost of hauling stuff that can just be disposed of, you know, at a local site, such as the vegetative stuff, along with the recycling of the white goods. So that is a function of the contractor, is to run a debris management site so that we don't overfill our landfills with stuff that doesn't necessarily go to that. But it's a very excellent point, and thank you for bringing that to my attention, sir.
And my follow-up real quick. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any process that y'all go through and work with these contractors to see if there's other type of best practices and making sure that there's some oversight of what they're going through?
Yeah, I think that there is a monitor that we assign, and then Kentucky Emergency Management has an oversight over that monitoring piece because the reimbursement and the application flows through our office. I do think that it's very important to make sure that we have proper monitoring of those activities, as those are big expenses. I think that as part of the task force that Ms. Webb has, as Senator Webb has proposed, as debris management could be a very good topic as we discuss the recovery phase. That her task force that was talked about earlier today could be a very important piece of that work, is to come up with what I would call a Commonwealth Debris Management Task Force. Something that actually, because we run that very early on, getting a handle on the debris and watching these piles grow, and hearing the plea from our local county and city officials to how urgent that need is to economic recovery and revitalization of the area that's been impacted is so important. I mean, you can hear the mayor at Coal Run. I mean, he's, if you spoke to him at all, he would tell you how important getting this debris quickly out of his way so he could return to some financial income coming into those businesses that have been shut down. So I think that, just one little piece of the task force that was created by the body this morning may very well be an important piece of work that we could tackle as a group.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very well. Senator Funky Fromeyer.
Thank you, Director Gibson and Secretary Gray as well, Secretary Hicks. You had shared with us 72 counties are declaring disaster, and then Secretary Gray, you were indicating only so many counties have been looked at. Do we anticipate the roads, I think you might have mentioned 29, 39 counties, do we anticipate that even more road conditions haven't fully been assessed, and with so many counties now declaring disasters, that the number could be larger, that we should be budgeting towards?
I do think that you'll see the number of declared counties and public assistance programs continuing to rise. We've submitted requests to FEMA for additional counties to be added. The mechanism for public assistance is more of a threshold-based assessment. So once each county is, it's based on the county's population, and that kind of equates to how much they can afford to recover from before public assistance from the federal government would be needed. And as we continue to do our assessments, then we request FEMA come in and validate those requests. Once those joint damage assessments are done and that county meets its threshold, we request on their behalf. So I do expect to see that the counties that you have now, 14 declared counties, will probably increase quite significantly for federal assistance. I don't know that we'll see any additional counties make their state of emergency declarations at the local level to the state. I think that 73 is kind of significant to what we're seeing, and I do think that you'll see the public assistance declarations declared by the federal government for FEMA assistance reimbursement. I think you'll see that number continue to rise accordingly.
Very good. Senator Webb.
Thank you, and thanks for the plug there. It's Senate Concurrent Resolution 67, for those of y'all who haven't read it. But, you know, I've been working on that for 2 years. I really didn't know that we would be hit once again, because we're still cleaning up from the 22 flood. Like Representative Fugit said, I dare say some of the debris was washed away in this one. And debris removal is very important. And costly. I'm just an old coal miner, and I know what moving material the costs are, especially in this day and age. So I guess the questions that I have would be in relation to that removal now, and FEMA will pay for that. How many times will they pay? Like if Pike County, I think, has a temporary site now, and will they pay to take that from the temporary site to the landfill? And then the second question is, how long will they continue to remove debris with the 13% match?
So as the debris mission starts to get scoped, we'll be writing a scope of work that includes all the debris in that county, whether it be, and that's typically from the right-of-way. Additional requests are necessary for commercial property and private property, that, in other words, if it's beyond the house, beyond the right-of-way. So as we continue to write the scope, we're going to ask for that to include all debris that's storm generated from this event. The process would be that's picked up along the roadside by a contractor that's on master agreement with the transportation cabinet, and monitored as well. And then that will be taken to that sorting yard that Representative Fleming said, and then we will take that, and then that will be transferred again to the landfill at that debris management at that contractor's expense. And those will all be acceptable FEMA charges if it's eligible, deemed eligible work, which means that the material was storm-related debris.
Yeah, and I guess so the debris, there's an idea of the calculation of the amount or the tonnage or the scope, and that's included in the scope, and that kind of defies a set timeline, if you will, and that amount that's estimated or calculated has got to be removed as part of this event. Is that correct?
That is. The scope is growing very, very quickly right now. We saw that this morning the estimate was about 41,000 cubic yards of material, and that's just the spot checks that are just being done as we're just now getting, a few days into this event. So we expect to see those cubic yards really start to expand. And there is the master agreement has charges for every little piece of that, and it's broken down in an itemized list. It does turn out to be a very expensive effort, though. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Representative Bojanowski.
Yes. So we've talked a lot about FEMA funding. The new administration is cutting funds left and right and blocking money from going out. Do you have any concerns that FEMA money would not come down to the state?
We have seen tremendous support from FEMA during this event. During the night that the rain began, FEMA had their federal coordinating officer drive in from North Carolina and be here in the state with us. By the early hours of Sunday morning, I had 2 FEMA staff and one of the FEMA Swift Water teams here. I couldn't ask for, and that's a tremendous amount of effort. To go along with that on the funding, as the declaration states and the letter that comes in, the 75% was what was awarded. And I think that the work that you're seeing done by KYEM and along with all the county officials to get those estimates in, to get those scopes of work done, we do see that that's going the way we would expect it to. I've not seen any break in function of the work that we're doing. FEMA has several hundred employees in the state going out. The declaration declared that assistance would become available. And at this point, I would have no alarm to the fact that I don't believe that those promises will be kept.
And Representative Bogan, let me add, we monitor daily now what federal reimbursement drawdowns the Commonwealth has done that are not happening, right? And we're watching this one really closely. That hasn't been a problem here with disaster aid.
Very good. All right. Gentlemen, thank you for your time today. We sincerely appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, anything else on your side of this?
Very quickly, the exact ask, I'll get to that first. So I'm hearing that we've got about $25 million in the WK safe that could be transferred over. The second ask would be about $20 million that was left in the EK safe funds transferred over.
Yes.
So you've got about $28 million under the cap. Those two things being moved over will put another 45, and then July 1 you'd have another 50 under the cap. I'm not saying that's sufficient. I'm just making sure that I understand those pieces.
Yes, you've said that correctly.
Okay. And then one last thing, and I don't want to hang up on this too much, but there are a lot of people that don't understand how this works at all, me being one of them some years ago. And so I'd be glad for a FEMA 101 from you, or else I'm going to do the following. Bad event happens. Immediate local and state response. Money has to be spent. That has to come from local and state in some form, some fashion. As you move along with debris and other things, then you have liquidity strains on local government, city, county, school districts, and others, because businesses are shut down and they have other expenses they're having to incur that they did not plan for. Correct so far?
Yes.
And then as we put state money in to help out with the local expense, both for liquidity as well as drawing down the federal funds, we have to front money so that the federal funds can assist with hopeful some repayment when those federal funds come back to the locals and passes back to the state who fronted the money in the first place.
That's correct.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, at this point, I think the House is going to conclude their business. Senate members, I do ask that you sit tight when they do. Thank you.
Very good. As to the House, we are adjourned. House members may leave. Thank you.
All right, very well. As the House members are making their way on out, Senator Mays Bledsoe, do you want to testify from up here or go down front? All right, very good. At this time, I would ask all the members of the committee to please give your attention to Senator Mays Bledsoe regarding Senate Bill number 218.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be quick. This is a simple little bill. The first time I think I've ever said that and really meant it. This is a local transparency bill, and in essence, it would, I worked with the Kentucky League of Cities on this. At the end of the day, you know, we all want to make our governments the most transparent to taxpayers as possible. And sometimes it's hard to find information. It's hard to always know where to look if you're an average constituent. And especially with 120 counties, number of cities, and number of special government entities, it's kind of like, where do I find where my government is spending money? This is all already available to the public. It's just not easy to find. And so this bill essentially directs the Department of Revenue within the state to create a central web page where it just essentially links what's already public available to people in one place. That's it. It has no fiscal impact outside that we would, of course, be asking Department of Revenue staff to put together the website. But that's essentially what it is. It's just to make it easier and more transparent for constituents. I'm happy to take any questions.
We have a motion from Senator Maiden, second from Senator Webb. At this time, we do have a question from Senator Givens.
Senator Mays Bledsoe, thank you for the legislation. I certainly don't intend by questioning to turn a simple little bill into anything other than that. So my intent is good. Quick question for you, and I actually went back and read current statute language At the bottom of page 2, when we say each local government shall, in the first advertisement in a newspaper or alternative publication, I think the word first means first pursuant to the action here, not first meaning one time in the history of that governmental body. Is that correct?
That's correct. The goal is not to, because they're already doing that. So we don't want to get in any way of how each entity by that statute is already providing notice to the public through public newspapers, all that. This just says, if that's where you're legally per that statute required to put that information, that's the link that also goes to the website.
And again, the word first means the first time you're required under that filing.
Correct.
For lack of a better term.
Correct.
Okay, other quick question if I could, and this is not so much related to your legislation as it is your next piece of legislation, next session, or somewhere down the line as you continue refining this. We need to ensure that there's a process to memorialize this sort of information, because if I'm a researcher that wants to go back and look at that local government entity's budget from 10 years ago, I don't know where I would go to find that right now. And so I would hope that maybe the next iteration of this sort of language forces DOR to maintain that into perpetuity, however long perpetuity may be. So thank you.
I think you're exactly right in terms of the conversation. And I think what's interesting as we talk about how, as we talk in the next 10 years, let's say, about how cities and counties continue to provide services to our constituents, it's hard necessarily to see how that works county to county and in different parts of our state. And so I think this just begins that conversation that would allow us to do more data comparison, more guesses about the future, what might scenario playing. So it's definitely a first piece, and it's something I think we could probably work on.
Very well. Any other questions on the bill? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Boswell. Senator Funke Fromeyer.
Yes.
Senator Givens. Senator Maiden. Senator Mays Bledsoe. Senator Neal. Senator Nunn. Senator Rawlings. Senator Richardson. Senator Webb. Chair McDaniel.
Aye. There being 10 aye votes, no nay votes, the measure passes with favorable expression. Congratulations. All right, next up, we have Senate Bill number 186. Senator Boswell, would you prefer to present from down there up here? This one's probably going to be a little more in-depth conversation, so if you want to go down to the table, that'd be wonderful. Floor is yours, sir.
Well, first of all, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for hearing this ad valorem tax bill. You know, I was in a district court meeting several years ago when 3 people in a row came up and pled innocent for speeding because they said their speedometer was broke. The judge then said the next person comes up here and says his speedometer is broke, is going to get 3 days in jail. So, I'm not going to say that this bill is a simple bill, like so many people say. Although it may have some complexities, it's primarily about overburdensome property taxes on the people of this state. The bill requires a vote of the taxpayers when a taxing entity raises taxes over 4%. There is no changes, I repeat, no changes unless taxes are raised over 4%. Currently, House Bill 44 already allows for recall petitions if taxes are raised over 4%. Let me give you a small example. If your tax rate is $1 on a $100,000 house, you pay $1,000 a year. If you compound that on a 4% that's already allowed, after 5 years, that tax bill is now $1,216. And that's not counting any raises in assessment. So currently you have the compensating rate, which is allowed. Then you have new property, which is allowed. And on top of that, you can raise taxes an additional 4% without being subject to any of what we're talking about here today. Paragraph 1 of this bill pretty much summarizes the bill. I do want to say two other things. Farm Bureau has supporting this bill, and I'd like to read a statement from them. I can get it on my phone. Come on. Got to get it right and read it. Okay. Kentucky Farm Bureau has prioritized House Bill 44 since 1979 that limits property tax revenue increases to 4% plus new growth. We also have policy supporting any increase over 4% being automatically subject to a recall vote. We do support this bill because it doesn't remove the 4% cap. It just automatically subjects anything over 4% to a recall vote by the citizens. And the last thing I want to say is that there's this talk about the nickel tax. The nickel tax is not affected in this. Nickel tax is already subject to the recall petition. Recently, there was a nickel tax, I think it was in Marion County, that was implemented and that went to the voters, and it passed 54%. And so I'm sure there's some taxing districts who are going to be opposed to this bill, especially those ones who are wanting to raise taxes. I urge the passage of Senate Bill 181, and I will yield to questions now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee.
Very well. Senator Boswell, if you don't care to take a seat back there, we've got 3 people signed up to speak against or speak on the measure. Forgive me, is it Mr. Hodges, Mr. Schlosser, and Ms. Ballinger? Is that correct? All right. If you guys wouldn't care to go ahead and come on to the table, identify yourselves for the record, and proceed.
My name is Will Hodges, Superintendent of Greene County Schools.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Carrie Ballinger. I'm the Superintendent of Rockcastle County Schools.
I'm Tim Schlosser, Superintendent of Simpson County Schools.
Thank you guys very much. Please proceed.
All right, Chair McDaniel and Senator Boswell, the sponsor of this bill, and the members of this committee, and specifically my senator and good friend, David Givens from Greensburg. Just thank you for what you do, first of all, and we do appreciate the opportunity to be here today and just talk about this bill for just a few minutes. While we have some concerns, I think our biggest message today is we feel like that the current statute that is in place, which was just reformed in 2024 by Senate Bill 58, provides adequate provisions for levy tax rates and the recall of such measures. So we feel like that provision is adequate. I'll just speak on school districts for just a moment, but there are a number of districts across the state that have not levied the second nickel. And I know the legislative body as a whole, you all have been supportive of districts having, I guess you would call it, skin in the game, and I think that's rightfully so, that you should expect that. And when they do have skin in the game, you all have been supportive of our districts and been willing to help districts with their facility needs through the equalization process. So for that, I say thank you, and I do think the process has been working well. One concern that I do have is that currently the rejected rates, if this were to pass, currently they go back to the 4% level. If this were to pass, the rejected rates would go back to the compensating rate. I do feel like that would cause districts to maybe move away from not attempting to maybe seeking after that second nickel, and only causing, I would think, greater disparities amongst districts across the state. And when you have those disparities, oftentimes we talk about the haves and the have-nots. I'm fortunate in Greene County that we have the second nickel. I'm very fortunate. Our facilities are great. It did not go to a vote. The community has been supportive of taking the local monies and partnering with you all, the state, for wonderful learning spaces within our community. Unfortunately, there are many districts that haven't don't have that opportunity. They have not secured the second nickel. They do not have maybe facilities that they need. And, you know, if this were to pass, I don't know that they would take on another special election. I have a neighboring district of mine that the nickel tax has failed twice. And they took on a special election each time. And both times it's a cost of about $30,000 for those districts. And they have to make the decision, is that a worthwhile cost for our district and our school district? I'm not sure if this were to pass and you do away with the petition and you go straight to a ballot and they have to take on the chance of having that cost again. I don't know how many of those districts that are without the second nickel would take that on. Furthering the challenges that those districts face. And, you know, this same district, I just had a phone call this week. We do have open borders, and I think most superintendents would tell you, we don't turn away students. We don't turn away students. We never do unless we're at capacity, and that's very seldom that we do that. But I had a call from that same district this week. They wanted to fill out a non-resident form. They had visited our district, they had visited our schools, and they saw the wonderful facilities that we did have, the programs that we have, and they were very impressed with our people. They filled that out, we approved it, and those students will be enrolling with us in the fall from that neighboring district that doesn't have the second nickel. While we don't turn those students away from those districts, I will say we are a close-knit group. Our group is a close-knit group. I want the best for every single school district in Kentucky. I want each school district to have the best possible facilities that they can have. I'm not trying to, I want to be the best. Senator Givens would tell you I want to be the best in all that I do. But at the same time, I don't want that to mean that someone is doing without. I'll end this and turn it over to my colleagues here. I feel like the statute that we have in place is a good statute and it serves its purpose. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing us to be here today to discuss this important issue and to also share a few of our concerns.
And Dr. Ballinger, I know we've got members with other things that they're kind of up against, so if the two of you could kind of keep it in about 5 or 6 minutes here, because then I know we're going to have some questions and such.
Absolutely. Thank you. First, I want to begin by saying thank you for what you as a committee have done to support public education. Of course, it's very, very important to our state and to all of our local communities. I'm here today because I have concerns that Senate Bill 186 removes some decision-making power from our local boards of education. And those are the very people that know our communities and know our school districts so well. Prior to being a superintendent, I served on a local board of education for 6 years, so I very well understand the role of a local school board. I'm just going to tell a little bit of a story that relates to my district in the essence of time, but construction costs have surged 30% since 2021. Many of you know that my school district, Rockcastle County Schools, we're in the process of building a new middle school right now. In that process, the cost of that middle school surged from $27 million to $55 million in our planning process. In order to move forward with the project, my local district passed 2 nickel taxes that have since been equalized by the state. In addition, we received a $17 million allocation from the legislature, which I'm so extremely thankful for. But without this current process in place, there is no way that my school district would have been able to move forward to replace this aging school. There is currently a petition process in place that serves as a safety net for schools and for districts. If there is a community does not feel comfortable with moving forward with raising that tax rate above the 4%, there's a safety net already in statute. We feel like that is both efficient and effective as it currently stands. I'm here today because I want every single district in the state of Kentucky to have the same opportunity that my district has had in moving forward with levying that rate above the 4%. And I'll turn it over to
All right, and I'll be quick here. Chairman McDaniel, thank you for having us here today. I just will tell a quick story. 22 years ago, the Simpson County School Board approved an equivalent nickel, and it went to a petition. It was brought in front of our board. They had everything in line. Our board chose not to move forward with the vote because they didn't want to spend the $30,000 to $50,000 that it would take to go to the ballot. Our community wasn't ready. We listened to our community. Their voice was heard, so we chose not to move forward. Fast forward 22 years, myself and our Board of Education, we spent 15 months educating our community on the needs of the equivalent nickel. That was in December of 23. We have some aging infrastructure. Our high school is over 55 years old. Our career and tech center is over 50 years old, and we've just got some really growing needs. And for those of you familiar with our area, the Brad area, our community is one of the fastest growing areas in Kentucky, and so with that, that aging infrastructure, we really needed to pass that equivalent nickel. And to be transparent, our board in November voted to let our community know as well that we are going to propose an equivalent nickel in December. And a lot of districts don't do that. We wanted to be transparent with them. We approved the equivalent nickel in December of 23. Our community supported it. We've not had any pushback on that. And also, and thanks to the partnership of you guys, we received a $4 million LAVEC grant in 23 or 22, I guess it was. And matter of fact, our bids go out today for an $18 million renovation of our Career and Tech Center and to build an alternative school setting on the backside of that building. And it would not have been possible had we did not have the equivalent nickel, because it's about a $14, $16, $18 million project. We have $4 million from the state, which we're very appreciative, but we did not have the bonding potential to do that if we didn't have that opportunity. So thank you for what you do, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And these are just some of the reasons that that we oppose Senate Bill 186 in the school districts in Kentucky. So thank you.
Very good. So if I could start to, I think this question could any one of the three of you. Your real concern is that the nickel would get caught up in this process, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yes.
So you're not as concerned about the standard ad valorem side. It's whether or not the nickel gets caught in the process.
Our concern is that the petition process would no longer be utilized, that it would have to go straight to the ballot. So that would cost
for the nickels.
Yes,
Yeah.
for anything above 4%.
Got it.
Anything above 4%. So that would cost our school districts anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 just to get it placed on the ballot. And then if that tax rate does not go through, then it goes back to the compensating rate versus the 4%. So that makes the whole process very risky for school districts to move forward with.
If you go more than compensating plus 4 plus new property.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Other questions for Senator Funky Frommer?
So two questions, just to follow up on what Chair McDaniel had shared. The looking for clarity that it would go back to the compensating rate versus the actual compensating plus 4. If you were looking for more than 4 and it didn't pass the ballot initiative, so then it goes back to compensating rate, not compensating plus 4.
Correct. It goes
Correct.
back to compensating.
That was the one question. So the other question, Super Hodges, when you had shared that you have the opportunity, you've got an out-of-district student, do you then charge that person the actual what they would have paid if they stayed, if that district did pass the nickel or the double nickel, do they pay the difference in order to attend your school?
There is no tuition charge per se. We receive the seat dollars for that student.
But your community paid the dollars to upgrade the facilities. This person's coming from the community that didn't, but that family isn't paying any increased rate to attend.
No.
Okay. Thanks for that clarity.
Very good. Senator Boswell, do you want to respond to anything at all before we vote? Very well. If you guys wouldn't care just to kind of step back. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you.
Today. We
Thank you
appreciate
again
it
for
greatly.
having us.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate the superintendent for a successful attempt to put the nickel tax on, which he did. And I want to get a comment here from the Kentucky School Advocate. Getting up the nerve for a nickel, district leaders who have been there say focus on the kids, cohesive message, and community players. And I believe that's exactly what they did. I don't think, this could be a subject to question, but I don't believe there's a change. The bill I have does take you back to the compensating rate, no question. But I believe the House Bill 44 also took you back. And the reason I say that, so if you raise taxes 5% and it was subject to recall and you lost, it would go to 4%? I don't think so. I think both bills takes it back. My bill does take it back to the compensating rate, plus new property. This property tax issue is the number one complaint I get from the people across this state that I talk to. They're concerned, but it seems like their property taxes continue to go up. So this bill, really, the nickel tax is already subject to recall.
So, Senator, if I can just ask, your intent and belief is that this should not apply to the nickel tax. Is that?
This does apply.
It would apply.
Yes, sir, it does. It applies to anything over 4. And it already does. It already applies. The only difference is my bill says don't force the taxpayers of these districts to go out and walk door to door. It says put it before the voters. So, but the nickel tax is already subject. So if you pass a nickel tax tomorrow, it's already been subject to recall petition all around the state. The only difference is those people had to go and get petitions filled out. This bill really eliminates that part of the process.
Very good. Other questions, comments from the committee? Seeing none, do I have a motion on the bill? So we're going to stand in recess for a second. At this point in time, I'm going to make the motion that we lay the bill on the table. Do I have a second? Second. Second by Senator Mace Bledsoe. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. Bill's laid upon the table. Thank you. All right. Moving along, I don't believe we have any more items to come before this committee. We still intend to have our regularly scheduled committee this coming Wednesday. Until such time, we stand adjourned.